The Journey by Mary Oliver. One day you finally knew what you had to do and began. Though the voices around you kept shouting their bad advice, though the whole house began to tremble and you felt the old tug at your ankles. Mend my life, each voice cried, but you didn't stop. You knew what you had to do. Though the wind pried with its stiff fingers at the very foundations, though their melancholy was terrible. It was already late, enough, and a wild night, and the road full of fallen branches and stones, but little by little, as you left their voices behind, the stars began to burn through the sheets of clouds, and there was a new voice which you slowly recognized as your own, that kept you company as you strode deeper and deeper into the world, determined to do the only thing you could do, determined to save the only life you could save.
Okay, so The Journey by Mary Oliver. Let's first look at the structure of the poem.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that there were so few stanzas. I think that in a way this created a sense of urgency that sort of forced you as the reader to proceed through the poem a bit quicker than you would other poems, and sort of indicated the never-ending journey. There's no pause button on life, really.
Yeah, for sure.
I think the content of the poem is kind of broken up to towards kind of a message of discovery. So you kind of are oblivious in the beginning, then you kind of have the urge to find yourself or begin your journey, and then you're taking steps, and there are certain obstacles along the way that you have to overcome before you can have realization of your individuality.
Yeah, it's definitely a stream of consciousness poem more than a structured sonnet or something like that.
I think also the if you're looking at the actual structure on the page of the poem, the alternating, long and short lines, I might be grasping at straws here, but I think that it means maybe the ups and downs of life and how those are always going to be there, but eventually you'll end in a place of satisfaction, hopefully.
Definitely.
Okay, so now let's analyze the content of the poem. Starting at the beginning. One day you finally knew what you had to do and began. It seems like the narrator is kind of finding their path and their purpose or calling.
I think it's interesting because, at a young age, you're sort of, all that you experience is shaped by those around you. And the point where you reach autonomy and able to sort of make your own decisions is where you really will start developing who you are as, an individual.
Right. Kind of saw it as, the urge to do things on your own or your way. But moving along.
Yeah, so then the narrator talks about the voices around you, shouting their bad advice and making the house tremble. So to me that seems like the voices of society or the mainstream media.
Almost preventing you from going any direction you choose. I feel like there's a lot of pressure from society to be a certain person or to achieve certain goals, and I'd say 80% of the time that's not who those people want to be, and they end up later in life not satisfied with where they are simply because of how they were molded from a young age.
Yeah, just kind of society boxing you in a little bit, and not letting you follow that urge that you might have previously felt.
Yeah, and I think that it says you felt the old tug at your ankles, to me means that this is a familiar voice around you or bad advice. Each voice cries, "Mend my life," but you didn't stop and you knew what you had to do.
I guess that kind of represents the determination to, get past that familiar old tug that you were feeling from the parameters that society's trying to place around you. I guess kind of the determination to keep going.
Yeah, you didn't stop, you knew what you had to do are very definitive statements.
Yeah. I think the lines that follow, the wind pride and with its stiff fingers, I think really show that even with determination, you're still going to face so many obstacles and so many people and things preventing you from really going the direction you choose.
Yeah, people kind of like grabbing onto you and dragging you down.
Exactly. And you have to be extremely confident, like, in yourself, I think.
And just to go around the stiff fingers line, the win pride at the very foundations, even though their melancholy was terrible. So it's not even that you feel that it's the right thing. It's just sometimes whatever you're feeling, whatever you're boxing you in is so strong that you feel that's the easiest way or the path of least resistance. And even though you like understand it to be something that's not great or happiness, you still are influenced by it.
Yeah.
It was already late enough and a wild night, and the road full of fallen branches and stones.
I think this creates a really powerful image because I feel like everyone can sort of relate to being in an unfamiliar place, especially when it's dark, and how terrifying that can be, and how easy it would be just to sort of give up then and not continue the journey. But in order to, find yourself or actually find where you're going in a literal sense, you have to keep going despite all those obstacles that you're facing. So I think that was really powerful.
Yeah, to me this is like the rough path or journey that you're going on, and the late night reminds me of just like being tired, and there are all these excuses like the fallen branches and stones that are blocking your way. But little by little, as you left their voices behind, the stars began to burn through the sheets of the clouds.
I think this is kind of like you starting to realize that when you're following your own voice and your own path, you get returns on that. You start realizing that you're more happy doing the things that you feel are right rather than the things that people around you are telling you.
Yeah, to me this is kind of the turning point in the poem where there's hope. And the new voice that you recognize as your own, it's like just knowing yourself and listening to yourself is what brings you out of that late, wild, dark night.
Yeah. I think for me, again, to just talk about imagery, I think like the night sky full of stars, like a clear night, in a dark place, I think is one of the most beautiful things that you can see in this world. And I think it's just one where you really are amazed like with the vastness of the universe, and like I think it represents potentially like the opportunities that you have and the ability to really understand who you are as an individual rather than who society wants you to be.
Yeah, and then the voice you recognize as your own keeps you company as you stride deeper and deeper into the world. To me, that's just like you don't need anyone but yourself. You're determined to do the only thing you could do, determined to save the only life you could save.
I like this last grouping just because I feel like no matter how much you want to help other people and I guess tell people what's worked for you and what hasn't worked for you, everyone really has to figure it out for themselves. And once you start realizing that yourself, I feel like that's when you can finally figure out like where you're going and like what you want to do.
Yeah, to me this is just like a reminder that at the end of the day, you can only control yourself and your life. And not only do you need to leave those prying fingers and old tugging voices behind you, but your new voice is what's going to propel you forward on your journey.